Rain poured over the neon-lit streets of New York, tapping rhythmically against the windows of Mary's Diner, a small, struggling 24-hour cafe tucked between two skyscrapers inside. The smell of coffee mixed with the sound of an exhausted woman whispering desperate prayers behind the counter. Her name was Laura, a 32-year-old single mom with tired eyes and a smile that refused to fade no matter how hard life hit her. Her uniform was slightly worn, her shoes barely holding together, and her hands trembled as she wiped the counter for the 100th time that night. But her mind wasn't on the diner. It was on her little girl, Emily, only 7 years old, lying in a hospital bed across town. Emily had leukemia and doctors said she needed a bone marrow transplant urgently. Laura had sold her car, emptied her savings, even pawned her wedding ring. But she was still short $68,000, an impossible sum for someone earning minimum wage and tips. That night, a man walked into the diner just as the storm worsened. He wore a plain black coat, but something about him seemed different. Calm, controlled, the kind of man who didn't belong in a place like this. He quietly took a seat by the window. No one recognized him, at least not yet. His name was Alexander Drake, a reclusive billionaire tech mogul known for avoiding the public eye. His face was rarely seen outside business magazines, and he was rumored to be cold, ruthless, a man who believed emotions were weaknesses. Laura approached with a polite smile. "Good evening, sir. What can I get you?" He glanced up, his steel blue eyes meeting hers for a second longer than normal. There was something broken behind her smile that caught him off guard. "Just coffee," he replied. As she poured it, her hands shook slightly. The man noticed. "Rough night?" he asked, his tone neutral. Laura chuckled softly. "You could say that." She didn't intend to say more, but exhaustion loosened her guard. I'm trying to save my daughter," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Alexander froze. Something about that sentence, "save my daughter," hit him deep, like a memory he'd buried long ago. He cleared his throat. "Save her? From what?" Laura bit her lip, embarrassed. "She's sick, cancer." I shouldn't be talking about this. I'm sorry, sir." But as she turned to leave, he said quietly, "Tell me." Something about his voice, steady, curious, almost human, made her pause, and she did. She told him everything, how Emily's diagnosis shattered her world, how she'd sold everything, how every night she worked double shifts just to afford medicine. And finally, with her voice breaking, she said, "She's all I have left. Please, if there's a God out there, I just need a miracle." Silence filled the diner. The rain softened outside. Alexander's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. He had once heard those same words from his own mother, when his sister had fallen sick decades ago. He was only 12 back then. His father, a cold-hearted businessman, refused to pay for her treatment. "Weakness isn't worth investment," he'd said. His sister died at 9 years old. Since then, Alexander had built his empire on logic, control, and distance, vowing never to feel that powerless again. But here she was, this stranger, begging for her daughter's life. "Which hospital?" he finally asked. Laura blinked. "St. John's downtown." "But why?" He stood up abruptly, placed a $100 bill on the counter, and said simply, "Keep the change." Then, without another word, he walked out into the storm. Laura sighed. Another customer gone. Another small tip. She had no idea she had just met the man who would change her life forever. The next morning at St. John's Hospital, chaos unfolded in the billing office. Doctors, nurses, and administrators huddled in confusion. A mysterious payment, $250,000, had been wired to cover Emily's full treatment, transplant, and aftercare. The note attached simply read, "For Emily." From someone who once lost his chance to save a sister. Laura collapsed to her knees in disbelief. Tears flowed freely. She tried to find out who had done it, but no one knew. 2 weeks later, Emily's surgery was a success. Her body began to heal, her smile returned. Months passed. Life slowly regained color. Laura was promoted to manager at the diner, and Emily was healthy enough to go back to school. One evening, Laura saw a familiar black car park outside. Out stepped Alexander Drake, again in his plain coat, no guards, no fanfare. She rushed to meet him. "It was you, wasn't it?" she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. He smiled faintly. "How's Emily?" "She's alive thanks to you." "But why?" "You don't even know us." He looked away, his voice quiet. "Because I knew what it felt like to lose someone when help could have made a difference. And this time, I could make a difference." She wanted to thank him 1,000 times, but instead, She said the only thing that mattered. You didn't just save her life, you saved mine too. He nodded slowly. Then maybe we both got our miracle. As he turned to leave, Emily ran out of the diner, her small voice calling, "Wait, mister." She held out a small paper heart she'd made with "Thank you, hero" written in bright crayon. Alexander knelt down, his cold exterior cracking into the warmest smile he'd worn in years. He took the heart gently. "Thank you, Emily. Keep being brave." He walked away into the fading sunset, the paper heart fluttering in his hand like a second chance at life. In the weeks that followed, the world began to hear whispers of a mysterious billionaire funding children's hospitals anonymously. No press, no publicity, just quiet compassion. And at Mary's diner, a small framed note hung behind the counter. One act of kindness can save a life, and sometimes it can save two. Compassion costs nothing but can change everything. You never know whose miracle you might become.